This is Luke from the Northern Myths podcast, and I'm here today to confirm what you might have already expected. The Northern Myths podcast is finished. I wish it hadn't taken so long to reveal what, you might have expected, but I'll explain why in just a moment. First, I just want to say that the podcast was an absolute joy for me and for Dan, who sends his warm regards. We just couldn't continue back then in early 2021, and unfortunately, we got locked out of our podcast email account, which was connected to all the show accounts, so we couldn't make an official announcement. But now I want to explain what happened, leave some last reflections on the show, and to tell you what I've been doing since then. First, what happened? Well, quite simply, I moved to Finland. This should be no surprise to anyone. I was interested in Finnish culture and mythology and everything Finland before the show even started. We got into the Kalevala because I was already familiar with it. We had some audience requests to cover Kalevala, and that was just the perfect excuse for me. But it was in the middle of COVID. This was a difficult time, and honestly, I just decided to take the opportunity that was presented to me, which was to move to Finland. And honestly, it's been fantastic. I love it here. It's my home now. I intend to stay. But it did mean that there was some difficulties with Northern Myths. And the thing was, we tried to figure out how we could make it work. There was a few months between my knowing that I was moving and the actual moving date. But the thing was, this was in the middle of COVID, as said, and well, we just had a lot of trouble figuring out what we were going to do. We were already having some issues recording regular episodes. We'd had to take a break for a while and already, but we took a while in making the decision is what I'm saying. And it was only with a few weeks to go that we actually made the decision that, yes, we're not going to try to do this remotely. It'd been a great time. We were leaving on sort of a good note that I was on my way to a new opportunity, but we made the decision that we couldn't keep it up if I was in Finland and Dan was still in Canada. Unfortunately, life got a little bit busy. You can imagine moving halfway across the world. I was a little bit indisposed. That's not an excuse, but there wasn't the time to put together a proper goodbye. And we agreed actually that we would do some sort of farewell once I was settled in Finland. Here's the issue. Unfortunately, the Google account for the show was attached to my Canadian phone number. And once I moved to Finland, I could no longer access that number. I'd backed everything up. I thought I still had access to all the two-factor authentication and all that, but Google insisted that I take a call from a phone number that I couldn't access anymore. So this locked us out of absolutely everything, the YouTube, the podcast feed, everything. And after some trying, the answer was that we wouldn't be able to get back into the account unless I went back to Canada and got the same number working and could take a call from Google. So basically that ended that idea. And honestly, I was also involved in getting settled in my new country. So that's why basically we weren't able to make any sort of announcement before. Now, as to why I'm making this announcement now, well, I was going through some old files, cleaning up backups and all this, and I found an authentication code for the account. And well, I tried it, and I guess something changed because I was able to get in this time. Google didn't need the phone number again. And so this was a few months ago. And since then, I'd been busy with other projects, but now I'm here to finally tie a ribbon on Northern Myths podcast. So again, I don't want to make any excuses here. I wish we could have made an official farewell earlier. The podcast feed actually expired. That I can't get back into again. The feed doesn't exist anymore. But here on the YouTube channel and on the social media accounts we have access to now, this is it. This is the news. The Northern Myths podcast is done. As for the show itself, I'm incredibly proud of what we achieved. I myself was on a personal journey of discovery, exploring these stories to find meaning in the mythology, and I feel we were successful to a large extent. I'm also proud that we were able to share these stories with so many people. I'm not aware of any other podcast that was doing this type of thing, except for Jordan Peterson's original series on the book of Genesis. I'm not aware of any other podcast that explored mythological stories in this same way. So I'm proud to have done that, and I hope that if you're listening to this, if you enjoyed the show, that created some interest in this area, in the stories, in the myths, and that you got something out of it. So that's my hope. I also hope that you continue to explore these stories and to find meaning in them. If not these stories, other ones, because to me, my biggest takeaway from this show is that the mythology really is telling us something from our past. It's telling us something that humanity figured out a long time ago. Countless lessons. You can go through the episodes to hear what they are. But yeah, the main thing is I believe that listening to these myths and stories can tell us a lot about humanity, about ourselves, and it can help you to find out what myth you're living. If you hear something in these stories that echoes with your experience, well, maybe you've got a blueprint on how life can play out after that. And if you don't like the story you're living, if you don't like the myth you're living, well, maybe you can try to do something to change that. So I highly encourage you, if you're listening to this, to continue to explore the myths and legends. Now, as to what I've been doing since then, since the Northern Myths podcast, well, the basics of it is I moved to Finland, but I also got very much into a new topic altogether. It's not entirely unrelated for a few reasons, but it might seem that way. And that topic is Bitcoin. I found Bitcoin in the process of moving from Canada to Finland, and I believe that Bitcoin is the monetary revolution that is going to create freedom for the world to operate under a monetary system that isn't controlled by anyone and to uplift people that are oppressed by the current system. So you may have some misconceptions about Bitcoin, and I want to be clear about at least one thing, is that I don't mean cryptocurrency in general. I mean specifically Bitcoin. Cryptocurrency is largely scams at absolute worst, and at best, it's misguided people who think there's some need to use blockchain technology. Bitcoin is the discovery of absolute scarcity in the digital world, and through that is able to create a form of money that cannot be counterfeited and cannot be controlled by any one single party. And what this means is it's a tool for freedom, for raising up the disadvantaged and impoverished, and for third world countries to escape the financial system that favors the Western world, especially the United States. It's also a tool for individual freedom as well. If you put your wealth into Bitcoin, your savings, you can opt out of the system that is currently chipping away at everyone's value through inflation and through other monetary controls. So I found Bitcoin and I really believe in it. And so I co-created with my good friend Knut Svanholm, the Freedom Footprint Show, a Bitcoin philosophy show covering the concept of your freedom footprint, or expanding freedom dioxide, so to say. That's a quote from one of Knut's books. You should really check them out. But yeah, this show, we explore the philosophical side of Bitcoin, why it's important, and yeah, it's really meaningful to me. So if you like what I've done here on the Northern Myths podcast, please do follow and subscribe to the Freedom Footprint Show. It's on YouTube, on every podcast platform, and we're on social media, especially Twitter. I would encourage you to follow along, at least give it a try, subscribe to the new channel if you like it, or if you're at least interested or curious and you can see what I've been up to. The other thing you can check out is I did a series on another podcast, the What is Money Show. It's really quite a big podcast in the Bitcoin space. And I did a series of, it's ongoing actually, but soon it'll be wrapped up, on Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson. And yeah, we did acknowledge in Northern Myths that Jordan Peterson was a major influence for us, but yeah, I'm saying it quite explicitly here. Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning was one of the primary influences of the show. And basically, the show wouldn't exist if it weren't for Dr. Peterson's lectures that he recorded and put up on YouTube, and the series on the Book of Genesis, which turned into the blueprint for this show. So Maps of Meaning, to me, after reading that, became one of the most influential books. It really helped me find personal meaning. And then I ended up getting to talk to Robert Breedlove, the host of the What is Money Show. And yeah, he invited me on to talk about Maps of Meaning because I'd read it. I really liked the book and I wanted to share that with others. And so basically, if you want the bridge between Northern Myths and what I'm doing now at the Freedom Footprint Show, watch that series. I'll link that as well in the description. So Again, this is what I've been up to since the Northern Myths podcast. And if you'd like to follow what I'm doing, all the information is going to be in the description. So what I'll leave you with is, again, thank you very much for watching or listening to the Northern Myths podcast this whole time. I appreciate it very much. So does Dan. Again, Dan sends his regards. We're still friends. We're still on good terms and all this. We just aren't able to make a podcast together anymore. And so thank you again for joining us on this journey. I hope to see you again in the future, and keep looking for the myth you're living. This has been the Northern Myths podcast. Thanks for listening.